Previously on Sailing Melody. We are Andy, Melissa, Jack and Ollie. Hi. 4 years ago we bought a tiny boat which turned into a huge dream to give up land life, move onto a sailing yacht and sail full time, and maybe one day to sail all the way around the world. So with a tiny budget we got a bigger boat, and then an even bigger boat which we spent 3 years rebuilding for the three of us. But then Ollie came along, so we needed an even bigger boat, and for the past year and a half we've been working on Ocean Melody, and we've now achieved our dream of living aboard and have set off on our very, very slow adventure. Last week we came to the conclusion that seawater is getting into our diesel tank, so in this week's episode we lift out to investigate. Right, this is a nerve-wracking and exciting day. We are lifting out. Part of the reason we're staying in Diganwy at the moment is because we've still got water getting into our diesel tank in the Keel, as you may be aware, which is why we put that upgraded day tank in. And a lot of people were saying, well, why haven't you just sorted that Keel tank? Well, we're trying to. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, but it looks like it's coming in from the sea.
It does look like it. So we've spoken to our insurance company, because there was an incident a while ago with the lock gates and what have you. The insurance company have appointed a surveyor. Quick pause just to give a shout out to our amazing insurance company, Insure, who have been just fantastic regarding all of this. Like, seriously, if you want boat insurance, we 100% recommend them. Link in the description as always. The surveyor has requested a lift out, and Diganwy are doing a lift out for us today. So what it means is we're coming out, staying in the travel hoist for the weekend to inspect the underneath of the keel. And we might be wrong, it might be nothing to do with the keel. But
just to clarify, instant with the lock gates, all the water went out of the marina where we were in Carnarvon, and the boat hit the bottom quite hard. We wonder if there was something under there.
Yeah, exactly. And also to clarify that it's coming in at the rate of about an egg cup full a day. So if our fairly hefty Bowman Corsair is taking on water at a rate of just 1 egg cup full per day, that's about 50 millilitres per day. To give you a sense of scale, if we needed enough water to fill half our boat to make it sink, it would take a mind-boggling 426 years at this tiny rate. So with such a small leak, our boat would stay afloat for a very, very long time. In other words, there's no need to worry about sinking anytime soon with just an egg cup full of water a day. But a leak is a leak, and we need our diesel tank back, so we've got to fix this. Right, so we're not sinking. We would eventually, I suppose, but it's literally you empty the tank, dry it bone dry, and then the following day there's a tiny dribble of water in there.
Yeah.
So we've got to just investigate that, you know, and see where it's coming in. So they're going to lift us out in a minute. So what we've got to do now is take the head sail down, remove the forestay, so that we can get really close in to their travel hoist. That's our job. That's our first job today, right now.
So they're just trying to readjust to see if they can fit us in, to make sure that we're not overhanging too much, because we're a centre cockpit and she's got a really sort of long back end. Trying to get the boat far enough forward to be able to be supported in the slings is proving a bit difficult. Just in this particular set of slings, it can handle the weight plenty, it's just the length. Apparently she's a banana boat. Yeah, because of the shape under the waterline, it's a bit banana shape, which causes, they don't want the slings to slip out, obviously, and then drop the boat. So they're being very, very good, because nobody wants to drop the boat. I'm really impressed with, because we've never had copper coat on a previous boat, is the copper coat. There's a few patches where there's just normal anti-foul, and there's not loads of growth, but there's some growth on there. But the hull itself is really clean, which is fantastic.
The local marine surveyor, Mark McGarry, had arranged with our insurance company to come and inspect the keel once we were lifted out. We all had a good look underneath, and he suggested that we fill the diesel tank with water so that we could see if any was leaking out, because if it's leaking out, then we know that that's where it's getting in. The surveyor is here. He's currently filled the diesel tank with water, and we have found some very minor damage to the very bottom side of the keel. Some little... well, it's difficult to say what it is at the moment. I'll show you. But he is currently just filling the diesel tank with water and tapping away at the bottom of the keel to see if any water is coming out. If nothing comes out, then that's grand. It's just, you know, historic scuffs on the gel coat and the fiberglass on the bottom of the keel, and we are golden, because it means that the water in the diesel tank isn't coming in from outside, which is fantastic. Whatever the case, I'm going to you know, tidy up the bottom of the keel and glass it up over the weekend anyway, just to kind of you know, repair those little scuffs, because it's just good practice. And that's what's happening in the minute. I'm not going to put the surveyor on film though, because he's requested not to.
Yeah, I have as well. Well, that's lead. Look at the difference now.
Yeah. It's just between the skin and the...
Yeah. Lovely. I've just drilled a couple of holes in this scuff. There's a scuff on the underneath of the keel, and I've just drilled a couple of 6mm holes in there to let out the water that's between the lead ballast and the fiberglass. I might drill one more. That's actually lead.
Yeah.
There's lead on the drill bit, look. No, that's good. Right, I'm crouching down here by the travel hoist because the wind has come in. It's windy. And I haven't got the fluffy thing on this camera. I'm too busy to go rooting around for stuff. The surveyor has gone. We have found a few small areas on the underside of the keel that do need addressing. So what I'm currently doing is cleaning up the underneath of the keel. Right, we're reaching the end of the first day of our keel repair, out of the water kind of stuff. The boat is now propped up and cribbed overnight. We're going to go back to Gail and Lee's for the evening. You remember our friends Gail and Lee? Oh, here's Melissa and Ollie. So we have found, as I mentioned, some small kind of imperfections, shall we say, some small damage to the bottom of the keel, and what it looks like is that they're historic repairs. In the course of the boat's life, it's been patched in 3 places, and then when the boat went aground in Carnarvon, those patches have started to come off.
Yeah.
They didn't look like they'd been very well done, to be dead honest, if I'm honest with you. They looked a bit naff. I don't want to sort of cast aspersions on other people's repairs, but they looked a bit crap. So they've been weeping, and there's a tiny little drip of water coming out where we've pulled those patches off. I've ground it all out. I've ground all round the whole of the bottom of the keel and cleaned it all up, the whole of the underneath, the whole way round, and that's now just going to dry out overnight, and hopefully, fingers crossed, tomorrow it'll be dry enough for us to repair.
Yeah, stressful but successful.
Stressful but successful, that's going to be the thumbnail. And
And then obviously what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to put a load of acetone up in there to draw out any residual moisture. So I'll just quickly show you around the bottom of the keel, but that's it for us today. It's not the end of the episode though. This is the bottom of our keel. Now I think you'll agree, can you see the little drip? You go on, drip for me. But that's the bottom of the keel. It's all cleaned up, all cleaned up, all cleaned up. I might do a little bit more on that before I glass it, a little bit more prep, but it's very close to being ready. And it's just sat on this block now overnight, but in such a way that it can still breathe and get rid of any little bits of moisture that are in there. And if you're wondering what are these two bits of stainless here for, my plan with these two bits of stainless is to put some plates either side of the stem where the anchor comes up, because a lot of people have mentioned, dead right, that there's a chance that the anchor could damage the gel coat. So I want to put some plates either side there, just, you know, cut them out with the angle grinder and Sikaflex on them on with a couple of bolts. If I have time.
The most important job is under the keel.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've got no childcare at all this weekend, so
I'm working by myself. So the priority is to get everything done below the waterline. So although I'm saying I want to do that, and I do want to do that, and I'm planning to do that, you can't do everything all at once, and we've got to get the under the water stuff done before Monday morning. It is the next morning, and the boat's been suspended in the strops all night with a bit of cribbing underneath it. Come up this morning, it's very slightly damp still. Not really, I mean it's pretty much bone dry, but I've got a few things that I'm going to do to try and speed that process up. Here is the state of play this morning, and I'll show you in a little bit more detail what the underneath of the keel looks like. Oh. The underneath of the keel now looks like this, from the stern end to the fore end, to the front end. Hang on, let me do it this way. So this is the stern end of the keel. And remember the boat's from 1974. So she's had her fair share of dings and bumps. Now there's a little dish there, a little dish there. This is all bone dry. But there, can you see that little bit there? I need to feather that out a little bit more. And then there's another little bit here, which I need to feather out a bit more. And then at some point she's taken a scuff here, which had got a patch over it. What I'm doing with these, particularly the bigger one further forward, I'm putting some acetone up into them using a syringe. So this is the worst one. Look at that. But what I'm doing is injecting acetone up into there to drive the moisture out. And then further forward, we're all grand. This is all fine. From the front end, this is the front of the keel. There you are. This is the front of the keel. And you can see, it's hard for me to see exactly which bit you're looking at. There you go. I think that's the, what you're looking at there is, yeah, there you go. So I'm just showing you what the bottom of the keel looks like. So my approach to dealing with this is acetone in a syringe up into those holes. I also drilled 3 6mm holes up through the bottom of the keel and into the lead. This is actual lead from our keel that was just swarf off the drill bit. So the nice thing is this keel has not got steel ballast, so it won't be rusty, so it won't have blown and expanded. It's keel, it's steel, it's lead ballast. So I'm injecting, I've drilled 3 holes up through the bottom of the keel, through the bottom into the lead, and I'm going to be filling those with thickened epoxy. But before I do any of that, as I say, I'm mixing up, I'm injecting acetone up into those to drive the rest of the moisture out. And I can't find my paint stripper gun, so I'm using a hairdryer, which is actually not a bad idea because the paint stripper guns get really, really hot. And sometimes I think a bit more gentle heat isn't a bad idea. Melissa's going to be going onto the boat in a minute, and if she can find the paint stripper gun, then I might use it if I feel like I need to. So I'm going to carry on drying this out, and then hopefully we can start glassing it up in a bit. I'm just going to ask if they can raise the boat up a little bit higher in the straps because I'm a bit low there. The puddle of water on the floor, by the way, that's not coming out the keel. That's just what was underneath that block and didn't dry with the breeze last night. That's a little bit better. We're a bit higher now, so I can actually get under there and see what I'm doing more. And we've got slightly higher cribbing, but she's still in the cradle, so she's literally not going to go anywhere. Now I've given that a really good blast with the hot air, I'm going to put a load of acetone up into there now, and then I'll just keep repeating that until there's no more moisture coming out. I'm also going to do a little bit more grinding out. There's just a few areas there that I want to clean up a little bit better with the grinder before I actually start slapping epoxy or anything into there. Okay, happy with that. This is what the area now looks like after I've V'd it out. Oops. So it's still a pretty ugly scar right along the bottom, but it's bone dry, and I think I can start mixing up some epoxy to go into there now. So my next thing is to mix up some epoxy, and I'll show you the system that I'm using. Another lovely thing about this marina in this yard, as I've said before, the people are just so nice, so helpful, so friendly. If I need the boat lifted a bit, they'll come out and do it. If I want it back down, they'll come out and do it. And they've given me access to their little workshop here. Oh no, that's the wrong one. That's the riggers workshop. But in here is just a little workshop where I've got my bits and pieces that I can use. I can mix up my epoxy in here and do all of my prep. The setup I am using is West System 105 epoxy with the 205 West System fast hardener with the pumps. Normally I weigh stuff out on scales, or I use the measuring stuff on the side of the pots. But with the pumps, you don't need to. It's just one pump of one pump of the other. Keep it simple. So that's dead easy. And then obviously gloves, stirrers. To thicken the epoxy up, I'm using West System 406 colloidal silica, which is basically a powder that you mix in to your epoxy. And it thickens it up like sort of corn flour or you know, like you put in your gravy. Somebody doesn't want to be on camera. You'll see. And then for putting it on with, I've got rollers, and I tend to use the fluffy ones with the I need to get some fresh ones, they're grubby. With the ones with the yellow stripe round don't tend to dissolve, but I have found these black foam rollers, the black ones, they don't dissolve in epoxy, which is great. They do dissolve, but they take a very long time. And then obviously I've got scrapers and formers, because I'm going to mix quite a stiff bog peanut buttery stuff to put into that crack. And I'm going to make sure I get it right up into those holes that I drilled. And then I'm going to glass over the whole thing, the whole length of the keel, in 1708 biax. Meanwhile, we're in here. Say hello. Say hi. So we're just having a cup of tea. Melissa's
I'm
editing
and doing washing.
Yeah.
And entertaining Ollie. I'm here for moral support more than anything.
Just so that you're aware, the episode that Melissa is currently editing right now, as we speak, in here, it's a really comfy lounge here, is the stack pack episode. So we quite often get comments going, Andy, you're not listening to the advice. People have said in that video that you should put a primer bulb on the fuel tank. And the problem is that episode gets filmed and edited and released weeks ago. So by the time the comments come in, and I've actually replied to everybody that said primer bulb would be a good idea, or at least the first dozen or so, and said, oh, what a great idea. I wish I'd thought of that. And I will do that. But if you make a suggestion in the comments and then I've gone ahead with the project and finished that bit or closed that bit down,
it's not that we've
ignored you, it's that we're probably a month ahead. Yeah. And I think we are about 6 weeks ahead now on videos. So the first 2 episodes in Deganwy, where we arrived here and then I did the fuel tank, that was literally 2 days apart in terms of filming and editing. But we didn't release it until weeks and weeks later. Which is great for us because it means our workload we're sort of finally ahead of the curve for a bit.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
There will be times in the future where we are filming an episode, editing it and releasing it to you guys within hours, and sometimes that's just the way it is. But at the moment, we're weeks ahead. So please don't be offended if you make a suggestion and I appear to ignore it. It's not that I don't appreciate your advice, it's that we're a month later. Right, I have done the best job I can of the of the filling and fairing on the underneath of the keel. I'm pretty happy with it, to be dead honest. It's filled those scuffs and scrapes and scars, and I've shaped the keel as best I can. It's pretty close. I mean, I'm sure somebody that does this for a living would do a better job, but I'm super happy with this. Let me show you. That is now where the really bad scar was here, and then there was a few other little ones further back. I might just, there's a little blobby bit there, I might just smooth that out because it's just still sticky. But I'm really happy with that. I'm really happy with that. I'm going to have a cup of tea, let that tack off a little bit. I've got epoxy in my hair. I had my hood up and then my hood came off. And I've got epoxy in my hair. Right, I'm going to let that tack off and then I'm going to mix up some more epoxy, roll some more on, let that gel over or start to go sticky, and then I can start to get my glass cloth on.
Okay, so now I've filled the hole. I'm completely confident with that repair. I think it's busting. And I've faired the whole of the underneath of the keel and spent probably 2 hours really properly taking my time to shape the underneath of the keel, to fill in any little divots and bumps and scuffs. I mean, it's a 1974 boat. I am sure in the course of its 50 years sailing, it's touched the bottom several times, and as I say, it's been patched, it's been fixed, it's been scuffed, so it's inevitable that this kind of job needs doing eventually, and I'm just thrilled that we found this and are able to deal with it before we go any further. My next task then is to cut my cloth, and then I'm going to mix some epoxy, roll on a nice thick layer of epoxy, and start getting the cloth on. I don't want to put the epoxy on and the cloth on too soon, because I want that to start to cure so that it doesn't all just and fall off. If I do it all too wet, it'll all just, everything that I've done, those filled repairs that I've done will just fall out. So I'm taking my time now to cut the cloth first, then I'll start going and mixing my epoxy, and then I'll need the epoxy to sort of start to go a bit sticky before I put the cloth on. Now, as I said earlier, the cloth I'm using is 1708 biaxial. It's the same stuff that I used to do the cockpit enclosure. I'm going to try and do as many layers of this as I can. Just have to see what sort of lengths I've got of this. I've got enough to do a good proportion. Well, I'll be able to do the whole of the keel, front to back. So I'm not going to do silly little patches. I'm going to do the whole of the keel, start to, you know, front to back. This cloth, by the way, is like a chopped strand on one side and a weave on the other. So if you're thinking I'm just using chopped strand, I'm not. It's woven on this side and chopped on the other. Right, so my cloth is cut. I'm going to mix up a decent amount of epoxy, and I'm going to just roll it on neat first, because it's already got the thickened epoxy on. I've done quite a lot of thickened epoxy. 1, 2, so as I say, I'm just going to roll this on to saturate the area, and then I can come and get my first piece of cloth and start rolling that out. And to roll the cloth into the fabric, I use these aluminium rollers. This bit was insanely difficult to film. It was so windy, the cloth was really hard to manage. Our gloves were covered in epoxy, and by the time we remembered to press go on the camera, we were all sticky, so we're kicking ourselves we didn't get better footage. We do really try to film everything as much as possible for you guys, but sometimes we just fail. Status report, the bulk of the job is done. All I've really got to do now is anti-foul over the repairs and a couple of other little patches, check a few other things below the waterline, and we'll be ready to go back into the water. But basically the big job is done. We had those little scuffs and bits of damage and little, you know, issues on the bottom side of the keel. We've ground them out and V'd them. I've drilled through to let any moisture out. I've used substantial amounts of acetone in there to drive the moisture away, and I've let it thoroughly dry. I've then filled that with colloidal silica and epoxy, West System epoxy, and then we've filled and faired the whole of the bottom of the keel back to its original shape, and then we've gone over the whole keel in 4 layers of 1708 biax. And the 1708 biax is basically 2 layers anyway, because it's chopped strand on one side and mesh on the other. So really that's 8 layers of glass cloth, and I've done 6 layers on the front, round the front, and 6 layers around the back. So we've got huge amounts of cloth on there, and then really well saturated that out with tons and tons of epoxy. I'm going to show you that, but I'm also just going to do a quick once over everything else below the waterline. Now I will say at this point, our intention is to lift out again before we leave the UK and cross the Channel to go to France and Europe. We might not be able to do that, but we have got that planned. and scheduled and booked in, okay? If it doesn't happen, then there's a reason for that. But the plan is for me to identify some more issues that we can lift out to give the boat a really thorough going over before we cross the channel and go into Europe. In between here and there, we're doing very short port hops. So our planned route, if you like, is from here to Beaumaris, 2 or 3 hours away, and then Beaumaris to Carnarvon, Carnarvon to Porthincline, Porthincline to Pwllheli, Pwllheli to Fishguard, and keep the passages to daylight if we can, to fine weather if we can, to 50, 60 miles tops. Really, I'd like to be doing 30-mile passages, 30 nautical mile passages. You know, basically keep the sailing as short and as enjoyable and as safe as we possibly can. And then as we gain experience with the boat and with ourselves and we gain confidence, those will inevitably get bigger, won't they? We'll be more confident to go further and take her further. But initially, we're just going to really short port hops all the way around the coast. But my first step today is to check over anywhere else on the underside of the boat that could do with attention, just to identify if there's any horrible areas. So cutlass bearing, prop, anodes, through hulls, and a general check over of the rest of the condition of the hull. Let's have a look. Right, the prop. The prop is in excellent condition. There's no markings, there's no pink on it. The cutlass bearing turns freely, but there is literally no play in there. I can't see any play in the cutlass bearing at all. Rudder stock. Again, it turns freely. There's resistance, of course, because it's turning the gearbox the opposite way, but the rudder bearings all look absolutely fine, and there's nothing blocking, there's no barnacles or anything growing between the rudder and the skeg. I'm completely happy with this. All of the housings all look, it's just perfect. It's in perfect condition. The copper coat is amazing stuff. I've never had copper coat on a boat before, but I'm super impressed. I am going to give the prop a bit of a clean, but I don't want to clean it too much because I think it's been treated with prop speed or some sort of prop antifoul, because it came out the water like this with nothing on it. So whatever is on it is protecting it, and I don't want to disturb it too much. So I'll just give it a very gentle, a kind clean. The prop nut looks good, the tabs are swaged over, the shaft is good, there's no play in the cutlass bearing. I can turn the prop by hand, so it's not too much resistance. Everything looks great. Anodes. Now, the anode on this boat, there is only one, and that worries me a little. So I'm going to take advice, and on our next lift out, I might add more anodes. But the anode is doing its job. It is starting to degrade and starting to pit, which is a good thing, because the anode is in effect dissolving rather than something else on the boat dissolving. So I'm happy with that. But I do wonder if there ought to be more anodes on my boat. So I need to do a bit more research, get some advice, and next time we lift out, I might add more. But that's been 18 months, nothing on the boat has suffered, and the anode is starting to do what it should do. So to me, that seems fine. It just seems intuitively, I feel like maybe it could do with another anode. I don't know. What do you think? I would like to put one on the prop shaft, but as you've just seen, I don't know if you can see here, there isn't room for a prop shaft anode. Look. Yeah, look, there isn't room for a prop shaft anode, and there isn't room for a rope cutter, which is a real shame. I would have liked that, but there just simply isn't room in there. So I might add more anodes. I'll take some advice, but I'll keep an eye on that, and I'll assess it again on our next lift out, and I'll prep in advance, I think, to add extra anodes if the math says to add some. And I'll take your advice on this. But bear in mind, we're going back in the water tomorrow, so fitting one before tomorrow isn't an option. Through hulls. This is the through hull for the engine outlet. These were new just before we bought the boat. Well, they were new when the boat was laid ashore. So the inspector that did the survey scraped this back and checked for any pink and said there's literally no issue. The valves are new, the through hulls are new. Through hulls or through holes? Melissa and I were discussing this earlier. They're skin fittings, but is it through hull because they go through the hull, or is it a through hole because they're a hole? I think it's both. But the through hulls, I'm going to check every single one. I'm going to scrape off a bit of paint, check to see if there's any pink in there. But I'm not expecting to find any because they were brand new before we bought the boat. This is the through hull for the cockpit drain. This is the soil pipe outlet through hull. we don't have a black water tank. That's the one from the heads outlet, and that one is the heads inlet. They're all copper coated and they were checked by the surveyor on the last survey, which is only 18 months ago. This is our paddle wheel, which I'd like to replace with a more modern type. Again, we're not getting any leaks, and that's a plastic one anyway. This is for our galley drain. It's interesting, this whole area had the copper coat removed, presumably to do some inspection or repair by historically. After it had been copper coated, this area had been removed. But I also wonder if, you know, when you're emptying the dregs of a cup of tea or something down the sink, whether that affects the marine growth on this area. But I'm going to clean that up and inspect it. It doesn't look like any problems, just looks like anti-fouls missing. But this is the cockpit, this is the galley sink outlet, and again, it was brand new before we bought the boat. This one here, I've just removed the bung, is our raw water intake for the engine. We had a bung in there to stop water running down onto our fiberglass. I'll give that a bit of a scrape as well, make sure there's no pink. Now, as I've said before, this boat is a 50-year-old boat, so it's lived a long life and has had many owners, I presume, and has had lots of work done over the years. Here is pretty obviously where there used to be a through hull that has been moved. Perhaps they've moved the heads or position or something like that. This is the heads outlet, the Blackwater outlet. So maybe it was there once upon a time. The repair looks good, but I am going to clean that up and anti-foul over that area before she goes back in the water, of course. And there's another one here, look, which looks like it, again, it looks like it used to be a through hull or a skin fitting. I wonder if that was a drain from the lazarette, which has been moved up there now. So, but they look like historic repairs that have been done quite nicely and don't seem to have any problems at all. But I'll thoroughly inspect them before we go back in. I say historic repairs, they're not repairs really, are they? They're upgrades or changes that have been made to the boat by previous owners. So that's my job for today, is to prep the boat to go back in the water, to get the anti-foul on, to double check any areas that might be causes for concern, and to make a list of things that I would like to do on the next lift out. I think where I'm going to start this morning though is get the sander out and sand some of the little straggly bits of fiberglass from where we did our repair yesterday, and use the sander to just remove some of the old paint from the areas that I want to inspect. So mask, PPE and sander, please. Melissa is sanding the boot stripe. She's going to repaint that, so she's keying it to resand because it's a bit flaky and looks a bit rubbish. I'm doing the anti-fouling. I'm using copper coat, which is what's on the boat already. You'll notice the boat looks green, while the copper coat is actually copper powder, like this stuff, that you put in epoxy resin, and once it hits the water it turns green. So you mix it up, and then the key thing is to keep it stirring, because you don't want the copper powder to sink to the bottom of your mix. In the meanwhile, Jack and Ollie are playing, and we're not on the pontoons, by the way, we're nowhere near the water, so it's a completely safe area for them to play, and Jack's taking Ollie for a walk in the pram. So yeah, that's what's going on now, anti-fouling and boot stripe. Well, as you can see, we are back in the water. That was very, very successful. The keel is all fixed and I'm completely happy with the fix. There's no water getting into the diesel tank now. At least, I don't think there is. There was some water a couple of days later. This is about a week after we got put back in. So there was some water, but that's because it had rained torrential rain, and I think some had just come in, you know, through the hatch and stuff and made its way down. So there was a little dribble, and I also am expecting some residual moisture that's trapped in there to sort of seep through. But I tasted it and it was fresh rainwater. It tasted disgusting, but it definitely wasn't salty seawater. So I am completely happy that no way on earth is any seawater getting in through the keel into the diesel tank. We are lifting out again, as I've said, in a few weeks' time, hopefully. Now, does that mean I'm now going to reinstate the big diesel tank? No, I'm not. I'm going to wait. I'm going to leave it several weeks to really thoroughly be bone dry, and then, and only then, am I going to thoroughly glass cloth the whole of the inside of the tank, completely solid, with a completely new layer of glass cloth and resin. And then I'm going to paint it, and then I'm going to put a lid on it, and then I'm going to pressure test it. So it doesn't just mean that, oh brilliant, diesel tank's fixed, we can whack some diesel in there and go ahead and use it. So that's why, guys, I've installed this this bigger day tank, the 60 litre day tank. So we are carrying now on the boat 60 litres in the day tank, plus another 40 litres on deck. So we've got 100 litres of fuel. And we're only doing short hops. The longest hop that we're ever going to do, I think, is from in the foreseeable future will be Pwllheli to Fishguard, which I think is 56 nautical miles, and we're hoping to sail, but we've got enough fuel, more than enough fuel, to motor all of that way if we have to. Anyway, there you go. We're back in the water, we're ship shape. We're actually heading off in the next few days. There might even be another episode for you guys before we head off, but I'm not sure. But we're heading off in the next few days from here to sort of start port hopping our way down south. So again, some people were sort of saying, oh, you've just moved from one yard to another yard and you're doing months and months of boat work. We're not. We've just been here like 6 weeks and now we're moving on, and that's our prerogative and our choice. But now we're sort of starting to hop our way down the coast, hopefully. So that's what's happening. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I'm not a professional. I'm not trying to pretend to be a professional. I'm just sort of doing what I do. But I hope it's been interesting and informative to those of you who don't know how these things happen, and a laugh at my expense to those of you who do. Thanks very much to our patrons, as always, for supporting us, and for anyone who's given via Patreon or Coffee or PayPal. All the normal links are in the description. And if you're not a subscriber, I haven't said this for ages, please subscribe. We've kind of stalled at 69,000, almost 70,000 subscribers, but if we can get 40 more subscribers, we'll be on 70,000, which would be amazing. So please go ahead and subscribe, please leave us a like, please leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time. Bye.